The true function of the Tree of Life, myth or technology? This is a question that sits at the very foundation of Western consciousness, a story so deeply ingrained we often forget to question it. We see it as a simple morality play, a garden, a serpent, a forbidden fruit, and a choice that costs humanity paradise. But what if that story, the one we've been told for millennia, is a radical oversimplification? A sort of user manual for a piece of lost history, translated and degraded over time until only the allegory remained. This is our point of divergence. Not a battle or a political decision, but a moment in a garden that could have set the course of human biology and consciousness on an entirely different path. We're going to use our AI simulation to peel back the layers of myth and treat the Garden of Eden not as a fable, but as a historical event. A place with rules, with actors, and with a technology so advanced it could only be described as divine. Let's start by looking at the tree itself. Our simulation, when fed the core elements of the narrative alongside cross-cultural myths of longevity and ancient astronaut theories, began to render something unexpected. The familiar image of a gnarled apple tree flickered and dissolved. In its place stood something that hummed with a quiet energy. Its bark wasn't wood, but a dark, bioluminescent composite that pulsed with a soft, internal light, the patterns resembling a mix of fractal geometry and an impossibly complex circuit board. The leaves shimmered, not from wind, but from a subtle energy field, and the air around it felt clean, charged, like the moment after a lightning strike. The AI visualizes the scent not as apples and blossoms, but as ozone and fresh soil, a smell of pure, uncorrupted life. This wasn't a plant in the biological sense we know. It was a device, a living machine. So if it's a technology, what was its function? The name itself, the Tree of Life, is the biggest clue. In our timeline, we fight a constant battle against entropy, against cellular decay. We call it aging, disease, death. It's the fundamental operating condition of our biology. Our AI model proposes that the tree was a biological regulator on a planetary scale. Its fruit wasn't a snack, it was a delivery mechanism. Imagine biting into it. The texture isn't crisp and fleshy, but something that dissolves on the tongue. A complex matrix of information. The simulation suggests its primary function was to interface with DNA, repairing telomeres, correcting mutational errors, and optimizing cellular function to a state of perfect equilibrium. It wasn't about granting immortality in the sense of being indestructible. It was about preventing biological decay. It was a firmware update for the human machine, ensuring the hardware never failed. The cascading consequences of losing access to this device define our entire existence. Medicine, hospitals, the fear of aging, the entire industry built around chasing the ghost of a function we once had as a birthright. This reframes the entire narrative. The story of Eden is no longer about disobedience. It becomes the story of humanity being unplugged from its primary support system. The fall wasn't a moral failure. It was a technological and biological catastrophe. The butterfly effect of that single event, losing access to a perfect biological maintenance system, is, quite literally, every single moment of pain, sickness, and frailty experienced by every human who has ever lived. The very DNA of our culture, built around the struggle for survival and the inevitability of death, stems from this one disconnection. The tree wasn't a test, it was a tool. And its loss was the single most impactful event in human history. But if the tree's primary function was to sustain the body indefinitely, what did that mean for the mind? A life without the deadline of death, without the decay of the brain, would foster a consciousness entirely alien to our own. The fruit, our simulation suggests, wasn't just a key to endless physical life, but a catalyst for an entirely different kind of awareness. So, if you had access to it, what would you actually know? What is the wisdom of immortality? And what truths would have been revealed to a humanity that never had to fear the end? That's where our journey takes us next. the wisdom of immortality. What would have been revealed? If you're enjoying this journey down the rabbit hole of what could have been, a quick like on the video lets us know we're on the right track. Now, let's consider this. We've established the Tree of Life as a biological maintenance system, but its greatest impact wouldn't have been on the body, it would have been on the mind. Our entire psychology, our very definition of what it means to be human, is shaped by a single, inescapable deadline: death. It makes us rush. It fuels our ambition, our greed, our desperate need to leave a legacy. But what if that deadline never existed? Our AI simulation suggests that the wisdom granted by the tree wasn't a sudden download of cosmic secrets. It was the slow, profound transformation of consciousness that comes from experiencing time on a geological scale. Imagine a mind unburdened by the frantic ticking of a biological clock. The simulation renders a society where concepts like career or retirement are utterly alien. Why would you rush to master a single skill when you have millennia to learn them all? Why would you hoard wealth when time itself is your ultimate resource? The driving force of life would shift from survival to understanding. Our simulation visualizes conversations with these beings. Their eyes don't flicker with the anxiety and constant calculation we see in our own. They hold a deep, oceanic calm. When they listen, they truly listen, not just waiting for their turn to speak. Their language would be incredibly precise, having had eons to strip away ambiguity. They wouldn't see history as a series of disconnected events in a textbook. They would have lived it. For them, the butterfly effect wouldn't be a theory. It would be a memory, a lived experience of watching a small choice made in 1 century ripple outward to reshape the world 1,000 years later. This long-view perspective would unlock a profound understanding of patterns, the cycles of civilizations, the ebb and flow of planetary ecosystems, the subtle laws of cause and effect that govern reality. These would be as obvious to them as the changing of the seasons is to us. The AI projects that their science wouldn't be a process of frantic discovery, but one of patient observation and elegant participation. Instead of smashing atoms to understand them, they might learn to coax matter and energy into new forms, creating art that lives and breathes, or technologies that are indistinguishable from nature itself. The knowledge revealed by the tree's fruit wasn't a list of facts. It was a fundamental upgrade to the human perceptual toolkit, allowing one to see the interconnectedness of all things, to perceive the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a single, vibrant, and conscious entity. It was the key to understanding our own place within that cosmic web. This alternate timeline shows a humanity that is calm, wise, and deeply connected to the universe and to its own history. They would remember the beginning. They would know the full story of the garden, of the tree, and of the forces that put it there. They would possess a history not of myths and broken fragments, but a clear, unbroken narrative stretching back to their very creation. And this brings us to the most unsettling question of all. If this state of enlightened, immortal consciousness was our intended design, our birthright, then our current state of being, mortal, fearful, and forgetful, isn't a tragic accident. It's an imposed condition, a downgrade. So if humanity was meant for this profound wisdom, who would possibly want to hide access to the fruit? Who benefits from a species that is easy to control, quick to forget, and terrified of its own end? Who hid access to the fruit? The story we've been told for centuries frames it as the act of a benevolent, if stern, father figure protecting his children from a burden they couldn't handle. A divine parent hiding the matches. But our AI simulation, when tasked with finding the most logical actor based on the evidence of a downgraded humanity, paints a far more disquieting picture. It suggests the entity responsible wasn't a god in the way we understand it, but something more akin to a system administrator, a cosmic gardener, or a warden. For the sake of our experiment, let's call them the architects. These weren't beings of love and mercy. They were beings of order and control. Our simulation visualizes the event not as a dramatic expulsion with shouting and shame, but as a cold, calculated system change. Imagine the moment. The air around the tree of life begins to shimmer, like heat haze on a summer road, but without the heat. The scent of ozone and something indescribably ancient, like stone and starlight, fills the atmosphere. The tree doesn't vanish. It simply recedes. It's phased out of our perceptible reality, hidden behind a firewall of physics. The cherubim and a flaming sword, which turned every way from the old texts, are re-rendered by the AI as a terrifyingly beautiful and impersonal defense system. It's not a creature with wings, but a self-correcting distortion in space-time, a quantum fence that instantly repels any conscious entity attempting to approach the tree's original coordinates. It's a quarantine protocol, enacted with chilling efficiency. Why go to such lengths? The answer is terrifyingly simple: control. An immortal humanity, with access to the wisdom of the ages, is not a species of subjects. They are a species of peers. They can't be lied to, they can't be ruled by fear, and they certainly can't be contained within a single planet or a single narrative. The architects in our simulation are portrayed as the original cosmic power. They built the garden, they seeded the life, but they designed it to be a closed system. An observable experiment. Humanity gaining access to the tree of life was the equivalent of the lab rats learning how to unlock their own cage and rewrite the experiment's parameters. This single act of celestial sabotage is the point of divergence for our entire reality. It's the original butterfly effect, a deliberate clipping of our wings that sent our timeline cascading down a path of mortality, ignorance, and conflict. We weren't punished for a sin, we were nerfed for our potential. This alternate timeline forces us to re-examine the very concept of the fall. It wasn't a fall from grace. It was a push. The architects didn't see our reach for the fruit as disobedience, but as a dangerous and unauthorized self-upgrade. They looked at a species on the verge of becoming their equals, or perhaps something entirely new and unpredictable, and they chose to preserve their own status quo. They chose stability over potential. They chose order over freedom. They locked the ultimate truth away, not to protect us, but to protect themselves from us. The greatest fear of any system of control is the awakening of the controlled. But this raises an even more profound question. The architects weren't just afraid of us living forever. That's a simple resource management problem. They were afraid of what we would learn if we did. They understood that true immortality grants a specific kind of wisdom that is fundamentally incompatible with any system of top-down authority. So what exactly is this forbidden information? What kind of truth is so powerful that it's worth plunging an entire species into the darkness of mortality just to keep it hidden? It turns out, knowledge itself can be the greatest threat to control. Knowledge as a threat to control is the oldest story in the book, and our AI simulation suggests it began right there, at the foot of the tree of life. The architects' fear wasn't simply that we would live forever. It was about what a truly unending perspective grants you. The ability to see patterns. Not just patterns in seasons or animal migrations, but the grand, overarching patterns of power, creation, and control. The fruit of the tree of life, in our simulation, isn't just a biological immortality switch, it's a metaphysical decryption key. Eating it wouldn't just make you live longer, it would fundamentally alter your perception of reality itself. It would be like suddenly seeing the source code of the universe scrolling behind the fabric of everything you look at. Imagine it. The AI visualizes this moment with breathtaking and terrifying clarity. A human from that primordial time takes a bite. There's no flash of light, no clap of thunder. Instead, there's a soundless internal turn shift. The world doesn't change, but their ability to perceive it does, exponentially. They look at their own hand and see not just flesh and bone, but a swirling vortex of energy, a temporary pattern in a cosmic field. They look at a fellow human and see the same energy, recognizing them not as other, but as another expression of the same fundamental consciousness. The illusion of the separate self, the very foundation of ego, fear, and conflict, would simply dissolve. And then they would look at one of the architects, and they wouldn't see a god, they'd see the warden. They'd see the system administrator, and in a flash of terrifying insight, they would understand the full scope of the garden, not a paradise, but a beautifully crafted, controlled environment. A nursery, a prison. This is the knowledge that is so threatening. It's a truth that makes control impossible. How do you rule a species that no longer fears death? How do you create hierarchies in a society that perceives itself as a single, interconnected organism? How do you sell a religion when the believers can see the divine machinery and the beings operating it? You can't. All the tools of control we've seen throughout human history, from divine right of kings to economic scarcity to nationalist fervor, rely on a limited, mortal, and individualistic perspective. They are predicated on fear, division, and ignorance. The knowledge from the tree of life is the universal solvent for all of those concepts. It's not a weapon, it's an awakening. It's the ultimate red pill, and the architects knew that once humanity took it, the game was over. We wouldn't just be free from the garden, we'd be free from them. This act of withholding knowledge created a cascading consequence that defines our timeline. We were left to stumble in the dark, rediscovering fragments of this universal truth through millennia of pain, struggle, and fleeting moments of enlightenment. Every spiritual text, every scientific breakthrough, every philosophical insight is just us, trying to piece back together the knowledge that was once offered to us in a single bite. The architect's great nerf wasn't just making us mortal, it was forcing us to live within a system where knowledge is compartmentalized, hoarded, and weaponized, a pale and brutal imitation of their own method of control. They set the precedent, and we've been following it ever since. But a system of control this absolute, a quarantine of an entire species, consciousness, requires more than just a locked gate and a firewall. It needs maintenance. It needs observation. It needs agents on the inside to ensure the prisoners don't start remembering what they lost or figuring out how to pick the lock. This begs the question, who were these agents? The ancient stories are filled with tales of otherworldly beings interacting with humanity, often portrayed as messengers or protectors. But in the context of this forgotten narrative, what was the true role of these so-called guardian angels? The role of guardian angels, in the forgotten narrative, is far more complex and chilling than the benevolent, winged figures of popular culture. If the Garden of Eden was a quarantine for human consciousness, then these beings weren't our protectors, they were our wardens. Our AI simulation strips away the sentimental layers of myth and renders a stark, functional purpose for these entities. They are the system administrators of our reality, the agents tasked with maintaining the integrity of the prison. Their primary directive isn't to guide us to heaven, but to ensure we never find our way back to the tree of life, or more accurately, the state of being it represents. They are the silent, ever-present enforcers of our induced amnesia. The simulation visualizes their interventions not as grand, fiery pronouncements from the clouds, but as subtle manipulations of probability, a nudge here, a whisper there. Imagine a brilliant mind in ancient Alexandria getting too close to understanding the quantum nature of consciousness. An angel doesn't descend to smite them. Instead, a scroll is misplaced. A crucial patron falls ill. A chance fire consumes the library wing containing their research. Our simulation depicts these angels as beings that might not even have a fixed physical form, appearing as a trusted friend offering bad advice, a sudden wave of inexplicable self-doubt, or even a simple tragic accident. They are the source of the thought that tells you your dreams are too big, that you should play it safe, that some questions are better left unanswered. They aren't guarding you from danger. They are guarding the system from you, from the unpredictable, paradigm-shattering potential of an awakened human. This is one of the most profound, cascading consequences of that original schism. Our very sense of limitation may be an externally imposed program, maintained by invisible agents. This reframes so many ancient stories. Think of the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, angels who descended and interacted with humanity, leading to chaos and a divine reset. In the context of our simulation, were they rogue agents who broke protocol, sympathizers who tried to leak the truth? Or was the story itself a piece of sophisticated propaganda, a cautionary tale manufactured by the system to discourage any future contact or questioning? What about figures like Joan of Arc who heard divine voices? Was it a genuine connection, or was it the wardens manipulating a geopolitical conflict to serve a larger purpose of control, a controlled burn, to prevent a much larger, more unpredictable fire of human potential from igniting? Every miracle, every unexplained intervention throughout history is cast in a new, unsettling light. Were these acts of grace, or were they system patches and course corrections in our alternate timeline? The psychological weight of this is immense. It suggests that the feeling of being watched, the subtle paranoia that haunts the human psyche, isn't just a quirk of our evolution, it's a cellular memory of the surveillance. The very architecture of our religions, with their all-seeing deities and judgmental overseers, might be a distorted reflection, a cultural echo of the very system designed to control us. We built gods in the image of our jailers. This is the ultimate butterfly effect of the Eden conspiracy. We weren't just cast out of a garden, we were placed into a panopticon, and the guardian angels are the observers in the central tower, ensuring the experiment in mortality and ignorance runs its course without any major security breaches. But their tireless, millennia-long mission begs a crucial question. If this much effort was expended to keep us away from the tree, the sheer scale of the operation implies the tree itself was more than just a source of knowledge. You don't build a supermax prison with reality-bending guards just to protect a library. You do it to guard a gateway. Their true function wasn't to police a thought crime, but to prevent an escape. This forces us to recalibrate our entire understanding of what we're looking at. What if the tree of life wasn't just a tree on Earth, but the tree as a bridge between worlds and realities? The tree as a bridge between worlds and realities forces us to completely rethink its physical nature, and this is where our AI simulations visualizations become truly paradigm-shifting. Let's be clear, we are no longer talking about a plant with roots and branches. That's the mythological container, the simplified icon for a concept our ancient minds could barely grasp. The simulation renders the tree of life not as something biological, but as something closer to theoretical physics. Imagine a stable, shimmering pillar of light, a place where the fabric of our dimension is thin, almost translucent. It's a nexus point, a fixed, naturally occurring wormhole, or perhaps a piece of incomprehensible technology left behind by the architects of this reality. It doesn't grow on the Earth, it pierces through it, connecting our plane of existence to a network of others, like a single, glowing fiber in a vast multiversal web. The air around it, as visualized by the AI, hums with a low, resonant frequency, the sound of potential, the static of other possibilities bleeding through. Touching a leaf, if you could even call it that, wouldn't feel like bark or plant matter. The simulation suggests a texture that's both solid and ethereal, like holding a current of electricity that has weight and form. Think of it this way. If our reality is a single, isolated computer, the tree of life was its Ethernet port. The Garden of Eden wasn't a geographical location so much as it was the room where the terminal was kept, a controlled environment with direct access to a cosmic internet. This bridge didn't just lead to a generic heaven or a vague spiritual realm. Our simulation extrapolates that it was a functioning, traversable pathway. It connected our world to others with different physical laws, different evolutionary paths, and different states of consciousness. It was the ultimate library, laboratory, and transportation hub, all in one. The expulsion from Eden, in this alternate timeline, wasn't a punishment for disobedience. It was a quarantine, a disconnection. It was someone yanking the plug from the wall, plunging our entire species into a state of digital isolation. The cascading consequences of this are staggering. Our entire scientific and spiritual history has been a desperate attempt to rediscover that connection, to build our own crude modems, through prayer, through particle accelerators, through telescopes, all while being fundamentally unaware that we were once hardwired into the system. So why sever the connection? Why would the wardens, the guardian angels, go to such lengths to police this gateway? The simulation points to a chillingly logical reason: control and stability. An infant humanity, suddenly given access to a multiverse, would be like a toddler in a nuclear control room. The potential for self-destruction or for introducing destabilizing elements from other realities into our own would be immense. But there's a more cynical interpretation that our AI model also flags as a high probability. Perhaps it wasn't about protecting us. Perhaps it was about protecting the asterisk system from Chondars, a species with the ability to freely traverse realities, to learn and import knowledge and technology from them, would become a sovereign and unpredictable variable. They would no longer be controllable subjects in the grand experiment of mortality. They would become peers, or rivals. The quarantine, then, was a preemptive strike to keep humanity in its designated playpen, to ensure the experiment could run its course without the subjects discovering they could not only leave the lab, but also potentially dismantle it. This reframes our entire sense of cosmic loneliness. The silence we hear when we look to the stars isn't the sound of an empty universe. It's the sound of a padded cell. We've been looking for the door, but we were born inside a room with no windows, forgetting that a gateway once stood in the very center. The tree was the door, the bridge, the escape hatch. But a bridge is useless without knowing how to cross it. A computer is just a box without the software to run it. The tree, in all its cosmic grandeur, was just the hardware. To activate it, to make the user, the human mind, compatible with its interface, you needed the key. You needed the operating system. And that wasn't the tree itself, it was the fruit it bore. This brings us to the very heart of the conspiracy. What exactly was the function of this forbidden fruit? What did it do to the human mind to suddenly make it capable of understanding and using this cosmic bridge? The fruit, as a catalyst for expanded consciousness, completely reframes it from a simple act of disobedience into a deliberate act of cognitive upgrade. If the tree of life was the hardware, the cosmic bridge, then the fruit was the psychoactive software key required to run it. It wasn't about gaining knowledge in the way we read a book. It was about fundamentally rewriting the human brain's operating system, allowing it to process realities our base model senses were never designed to perceive. It was the ultimate red pill, and the story of Eden is the story of a species being told to remain content inside the matrix. Our AI simulation visualizes the consumption of this fruit not as a gentle intellectual awakening, but as a biological and psychic detonation. The first sensation isn't taste, sweet or sour, but sound. The low, resonant hum of the tree bridge, once a background noise, suddenly floods the user's awareness, becoming the base frequency of their own cells. The simulation shows the world fracturing into a kaleidoscope of potential timelines. You don't just see the path you're on, you see all the paths you could have taken, shimmering like heat haze on a summer road. The very concept of linear time dissolves. You can feel the past not as a memory, but as a tangible place that still exists, and the future not as an abstraction, but as a field of probabilities you can almost reach out and touch. It's a sensory and cognitive overload of unimaginable proportions. The brain, our biological processor, is being forcibly overclocked. This is what expanded consciousness truly means in this context. It's not about becoming a better person or knowing more facts. It's a perceptual phase shift. The simulation suggests the fruit acts as a neurological key, unlocking dormant parts of the brain and activating a kind of biological quantum receiver. Suddenly, the user can perceive the higher dimensions that theoretical physics hints at. They don't just believe in a connected universe. They experience it as a constant, tangible data stream. The tree bridge is no longer a mysterious pillar of light. Its function becomes intuitively obvious. You understand its architecture, its energy requirements, its navigational interface, just as we understand how to click a link on a web page. The fruit doesn't give you the answers to the universe's mysteries. It gives you the user interface to access the database where those answers are stored. And this is precisely why it was forbidden. The Guardians of Eden weren't afraid of humanity knowing the difference between right and wrong in a simplistic moral sense. They were terrified of humanity undergoing a cognitive singularity that would make them ungovernable. A species that can perceive the underlying code of reality cannot be controlled by dogma, fear, or political narratives. How do you lie to a being who can perceive the immediate cascading consequences of that lie across multiple timelines? How do you enforce a border on a consciousness that can traverse dimensions as easily as we walk across a room? The prohibition wasn't about protecting us from knowledge. It was about protecting a system of control from us. It was a quarantine measure to keep the test subjects from realizing they could not only leave the laboratory, but could also rewrite the entire experiment. Our own history, with its brutal, agonizingly slow crawl of scientific discovery and spiritual confusion, is the direct butterfly effect of this aborted upgrade. In our timeline, we only got a corrupted file, a partial download. We received the knowledge of good and evil, the self-awareness, the shame, the anxiety of mortality, but the core update, the cosmic perspective that gives it all context, failed to install. We're left with a buggy operating system, prone to crashing, constantly searching for a connection we can no longer even remember having. We feel a profound sense of cosmic loneliness and divine abandonment because we were severed from the network, left with only the ghost of a memory of what it felt like to be fully connected. This raises a haunting question. If a technology this powerful, this fundamental, existed, does it ever truly disappear completely? Or does it just break apart, its fragments embedding themselves into the very fabric of our world, waiting to be rediscovered? Could pieces of Eden, remnants of this incredible catalyst, still be out there, hidden in plain sight? That's what our simulation will search for next. What remains of Eden in the modern world? Our AI simulation suggests the answer is both everywhere and nowhere. The garden wasn't a geographical location that was lost, like Atlantis. It was a state of being, an interface between our biology and the universe's underlying operating system. When we were disconnected, the system didn't just vanish, it shattered. The remnants aren't ruins of stone, but echoes embedded in the very code of our humanity, in our spirituality, our art, and even our subconscious. Think about the universal human quest for transcendence. Our simulation visualizes this not as a vague spiritual yearning, but as a biological imperative, a cellular memory of a lost connection. Every mystic who has ever entered a deep trance, every shaman who has journeyed into other realms, every person who has had a profound, life-altering experience of unity with the cosmos, they aren't just hallucinating. The AI depicts these moments as a kind of signal hunting. For a fleeting second, their consciousness through meditation, ritual, or even trauma accidentally tunes into the faint, residual frequency of the tree bridge. The world shimmers. The walls between realities grow thin. They experience a momentary, low-bandwidth connection to the network we were cast out from. They come back speaking of light, unity, and ineffable knowledge because they have, for an instant, experienced a single packet of data from the cosmic internet. Our religions and spiritual traditions are, in essence, elaborate, millennia-long attempts to reverse engineer the login credentials. The fragments are also hidden in plain sight, encoded in our art and architecture. Why do we see sacred geometry, the flower of life, mandalas, the golden ratio, appearing independently in cultures all over the world? The simulation posits these aren't just pleasing patterns, they are the ghostly remnants of the universe's user interface. Imagine them as corrupted icons on a broken monitor. You can't click them anymore, their function is lost, but the shape remains, hauntingly familiar. Our simulation shows the luminous, energetic structure of the tree bridge, its swirling fractal architecture, and then seamlessly morphs it. You see its patterns, echoed in the rose window of a Gothic cathedral, the layout of a Buddhist mandala, and even, chillingly, the intricate design of a modern microprocessor. We have been unconsciously trying to rebuild the hardware, carving its schematics into our temples and our technology, driven by a deep instinctual blueprint we no longer understand. And finally, the most intimate remnant of Eden exists within you, in your dreams. The AI simulation frames the concept of a collective unconscious as a fragmented data cache from the original network. It's the shared, lingering memory of a reality where consciousness was not bound by a single body or a linear perception of time. Every myth of a lost golden age, every dream of flying, every story of gods walking among mortals, these are not mere fictions. They are the echoes of the Edenic operating system, the ghost in our machine. The simulation visualizes this as a bleed-through effect. A person dreams of their mundane office, but for a moment, the cubicle walls become translucent, revealing the living, crystalline structures of that other world. The anxiety and cosmic loneliness that define so much of the human condition are the direct butterfly effect of that original disconnection. We are a species with phantom limb syndrome, aching for a connection we can't even consciously remember having. This entire journey, this simulation of the Eden conspiracy, wasn't just an exploration of a past that never was. It was an attempt to diagnose the present. It reframes our entire history, our wars, our art, our science, our relentless search for meaning, as the long, painful consequence of a single, aborted cognitive upgrade at the dawn of our species. The story of Eden is not over. We are living in its epilogue, surrounded by the beautiful, tragic fragments of what we were meant to be. The simulation is now complete, and as the light of this alternate timeline fades, we are left back in our own. But perhaps we see it a little differently now, not as a flawed creation, but as a world haunted by the ghost of its own perfection. What detail or consequence of this alternate history did you find most impactful? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to continue challenging the story we think we know, exploring the pasts that never were, and decoding the present they left behind, be sure to subscribe to How Would It Be by AI and activate the notification bell. The next point of divergence is waiting.